to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. So Arjun works as a director of data and science at Wesco. If anybody's not familiar with Wesco, it's a business-to-business distribution and supply chain company. Its primary focus is to lead data science initiatives. Um, he leads also a cross-functional and global team of data engineers, data scientists, and business analytics. So prior to Wesco, Arjun worked in the energy and retail segment, ExxonMobil and Amazon. So with his grad school and early career, he focused on algorithm development and physics-based simulations for robotics and for hydrocarbon exploration. Um, so Arjun holds a master's degree in electrical engineering and an executive MBA from Cornell. Also, Pritam Debnath. So he's the director of inbound supply chain technology. He's responsible for the end-to-end technology delivery for Cisco inbound supply chain processes, encompassing areas such as demand planning and forecasting, purchase order lifecycle management, supplier collaboration, and inbound supply chain analytics. Pritam is also responsible for championing innovation for Cisco supply chain technology. Over the course of his career, 19 years, Britain has worked across multiple technologies ranging from mainframe technology, SAP, cloud technology across Amazon Web Service and Google Cloud, web technology and advanced analytics. Britain holds a postgraduate diploma in data science and business analytics from UT in Austin, and a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering from Bengal Institute of Technology in India. So without further ado, Arjun, Pritam, would you like to share your screen? I'm going to stop sharing
Sure.
now.
Yeah. I can
Perfect.
share my screen. Hey, thanks a
Thank you.
lot. Thanks again, Johanna, for reaching out to us and having us as a part of the panelists or speakers in this PDM. Really excited to be here. This is my first time talking to ASEM Houston chapter. I've been in Houston for 18 years. I know, apart from what I do at Vesco, I'm also speak at a lot of external engagements, especially with the advent of AI and Gen AI, both from a commercial perspective, trying to drive ROI and use case success in corporates and from a commercial standpoint, but also teach the next generation of kids, because I firmly believe that with this advent of AI, it's kind of the next phase after, from a technology perspective, after internet revolution. So I spend a lot of my time while volunteering with youths and young adults, who have a big responsibility on their shoulders in terms of taking everything that we have built so far and putting that out there in the right hands and making sure that they're doing the right things about it. So I spend a lot of my time outside of work in those commitments as well, and really glad to be here. Pritam, do you want to go
Yeah,
through it quickly?
absolutely. Hello, everyone. Pritam here. As you could see in my bio, I'm the director of Cisco's inbound supply chain technology, and it has been the story of my life to kind of clear the confusion. This was better because it was spelled out as SYSCO. But a lot of time when I talk about Cisco, I always tell that it's not the CISCO Cisco, it's the SYSCO Cisco. And I was, I was the victim of that confusion myself when I joined. So yeah. So this is my 19th year working for Cisco. Multiple technologies, multiple project, worked with a lot of great people, like Elizabeth. And yeah, I mean, just really glad to be here and talk about a topic which is very close to my heart.
Cool. So what I'll do is I'll start sharing. Do I have the screen share option available, Joanna? Okay, I see that. Okay.
So you should be able to.
Yeah. Okay. And let me know when y'all can see my screen.
We can see it. Perfect.
Awesome. I'll go on full screen. Hopefully you're seeing the full screen view. right?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So for the, I don't know, like for the next close to 15 minutes or so, uh, what me and Preetham plan to do is, like we'll just like set the pace for in terms of what we are going to do. We don't want to be a death by slideshow, so we want it to be like as interactive as we can. We can obviously spend a lot of time at the end of the PowerPoint or at the end of our talk to kind of answer any additional questions, but feel free to stop us, pause, raise your hands anytime. I mean, like so that way we can all learn as we go. Um, from a agenda perspective, what me and Preetham thought is, we it would be good to kind of go give a high level overview of what is everything about this AI and data and analytics, and what does this mean particularly for supply chain from the lens that we see for like enterprises, and a bit more of deep dive into how can you as an enterprise or an organization or a community build that maturity, like how do you think about the data and analytics maturity. So it's more about strategy of building analytics and AI capability for your organization. And with the recent advent of generative AI, or I call it Gen AI, which propels Chat GPT, which we cannot ignore, what we have done is we have put up some kind of a roadmap which is more or less pertinent to a supply chain focused industry, where, like if you are starting from scratch, depending on what your maturity is, how can you go about building that maturity within your own four walls? Um, and then we plan to talk about the common challenges and the pitfalls. How do you measure ROI? Again, like one of the from my own experience, what I've seen is from advanced analytics and AI, when you implement that for big corporations, if you don't have tangible metrics like KPIs and metrics defined, you can fail down the lane because of lack of adoption and all the other challenges associated with scaling and whatnot. Um, and like we thought we'll go over a few use cases on AI pertaining to supply chain. So hopefully that resonates with like with y'all. And in the end, more like what do we see as the future trends, and from a strategic consideration. So we try to design tailor this more from an enterprise centric use case, but we can talk through the other lens in terms of risk, and how do we kind of enable the community around us to build AI models safely and securely, and impact of supply chain, uh, all the other challenges that we see. So we can kind of take it in other directions also, but we try to tailor this more on enterprise focus. So that's the agenda. Anything that you want to add, Preetham, before we
No,
kick off?
no, I
Okay,
think let's dive right in.
cool. So I'll kick this off and then hand it over to Preetham. Um, you know, the one thing that we see is like when you think about your maturity of that data and analytics, right? I mean, like every company now, every enterprise, small, medium, large, is being more intentional and starting to think about how can you use data and analytics to your competitive advantage. So very simple, two-dimensional plot here. You have the maturity on the x-axis and then your competitive advantage on the y-axis. Now, everybody here, I'm sure, like is used to looking at dashboards and reports, be it for operations or for inventory or for any supply chain needs, right? So the hindsight and part of insight is something that most of the companies are already embarking on. Uh, and that is more of a sense and respond, right? I'm like, how do you kind of like you're always like doing a look back analysis on things that has already happened. The push for advanced analytics and AI within supply chain and within like every other vertical is kind of go from that insights to foresights. And what I mean by that is, you know, uh, instead of saying, why did it happen, kind of to do that look back, can you kind of use that data, that historical data, whether you're trying to do a demand forecasting or trying to come up with a lead time prediction for your supplier, whatever that is, how are you going to make use of that data and come up with a look ahead forecast for it so that it can help your business, it can help with your planning. So that is kind of the early phase of insight, what we call as predictive modeling. And from that, and that capability is being built in a lot of enterprises, right? Because even before the advent of ChatGPT, a lot of enterprises, like I can at least say from Vesco and from Cisco's perspective, we all have been embarking on this journey, be it forecasting or any of the predictive analytics. What is happening now is, like there's a lot of push within enterprises to go more prescriptive. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying what will happen, can you come up with a range of scenarios by being able to run simulations? Like I call it more of what if scenario, right? And that will help you with more advanced planning. So you can not only predict, but you can also prescribe by doing that prescriptive analytics. So that is, I'm still talking within the realm of, advanced analytics approaches, not necessarily related to the chat GPTs of the world, which is more generative in nature. Now that's where we shift from foresights to action. And what that action means is, how can we be more preemptive? What more can I do, right? And this is where the system, the AI, or like whatever the intelligence, I would call it more of a cognitive AI there, that intelligence that you put within your system, it's actually constantly looking at all the data. It is constantly trying to analyze the data and trying to come up with recommendations for you so that you can plan ahead of time and say, what more can you do? And that's where I would say in this era of chat GPTs of the world, or in the era of the generative AI, most of the companies are starting to embark on that. So I just want to like paint that picture up front, in terms of how to think about this data and analytics maturity, and like what does it mean for your company or for your organization to have that competitive advantage over others. So I'll pause here. Anything that you wanted to add, Pritam, or any questions from the audience? Any thoughts on this?
No, and I think nothing much to add. I think you covered it perfectly, Arjun. Just a bit of a color that this is a journey that every organization has to take, and it's not a formula per se. It's a mix. Some of the time, the challenge is not always to go from point A to point B. It's also about sometimes resisting the hype, because when we talk practically, we are living at this point of time. I mean, it's almost like when the world is divided into chat GPT and post chat GPT era. A lot of us in this meeting, right, I'm pretty sure, are dealing with pressures and heightened expectation that generative AI could solve world hunger, right? It could solve everything, and it's also a challenge, and it's a journey more than a challenge or an opportunity to actually navigate through it, really understand. It's very important to understand where data analytics or Gen AI in specific would give you a comparative advantage. It's equally important to know where you should step back, right? I think that's the tightrope that we are walking at this point of time. So, and when we talk about the different use cases, etc., I think that's where we wanted to kind of have this discussion veered towards that. It's not just everything hunky-dory, right? Of course, theoretically there are tons, and we don't have to explain supply chain to this group. I mean, this group is like the who's have supply chain, all about it, right? It's a matter of kind of talking about the different use cases, and also on kind of share notes in terms of what are the pitfalls, what are the challenges, so that we can all kind of navigate it together.
Perfect. Yeah. Well said, Preetham. All right. So if I'm not looking at the chat because my screen is full, like I'm having a full screen here, but if anybody sees anything from the chat, please like raise your hands or just unmute and speak up. But if not, we'll keep moving here. And let's see. Okay. Why don't you kick this off, Preetham?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it is the easy part. because I really don't have to explain what is planned by source, move, store, sell is to this group for sure. So my job becomes much easier. And even the individual use cases, I don't think I need to explain a lot. Especially I'll just give some examples, right? So for plan, as Arjun also talked about it, I mean, demand forecasting is a must. I mean, that's not a luxury, especially in this world when there is a lot of volatility. There is a lot of supply disruptions. Accurate demand forecasting is absolutely important for us to stay competitive. So while demand forecasting has been there for ages, I mean, there's nothing new in demand forecasting. And starting from paper to spreadsheets to some of the ERP softwares to now some of the cloud-based modern softwares and all. I think the game, the real game is in those small BPS, right? Those small basis point improvement, which look small, when we look at like 5 basis points improvement and 10 basis points improvement, but increasing those basis points really, really has an impact to, better buying decisions, better service levels, more agility in your supply chain life cycle. So that's where advanced demand forecasting comes into picture, where we really want to use advanced time series, machine learning concepts. And also this is one area which has evolved a lot. I mean, from initial mathematical models to now, and I'm not going too deep into it, but and please feel free to reach out to Arjun or me if you need a deeper dive on that. But yeah, just the use of advanced algorithms. And this is also a classic case where Gen AI or generative AI can make a difference, not necessarily in terms of, predicting demand, right? That's not necessary. And that's where I want to talk about where, Gen AI is where it is really a Gen AI use case, and where maybe we can navigate through the hype and talk about where it's a traditional machine learning use case. So this, I think it's more the traditional machine learning use cases. Where Gen AI comes into picture is for the teams, the business teams that you all have. Let's say an inventory planner is seeing a spike in demand, a demand variance, right? And he or she wants to understand the reason for that spike, right? And instead of going to multiple different systems and really understand, for that, you need to have a certain level of familiarity with technology, with like SQL, for example, in fact, a bit of intermediate level SQL, etc. But Gen AI is making it much easier, where if you design it accordingly, all it takes is a natural language or an English query, right? I'm seeing a demand spike for a certain item or for a certain SKU. Why is it happening, right? And that's pretty much it. So what that means is, it is actually democratizing. It's not only about the business use case, it is also about democratizing the analytical part of it beyond data scientists, or like someone who is really technology savvy, right? It is bringing analytics to everyone and analytics for everyone, right? So that's a key portion of it. That's what I was talking about, understanding demand signals by source. Yeah, I mean, of course, our entire buying process, our life revolves around the life cycle of a purchase order. And with large enterprises, with thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of purchase orders, what we are talking about, it's important for us to make sure the perfect order percentage, and you all know what a perfect order is. A perfect order percentage increases, so that there is less manual intervention. So AI is helping a lot in that, basically to get the demand signals and actually automate a whole process of purchase order, and just cutting down manual work, which is really helping the planners to actually focus on value-added work, right? some of the examples, the supplier segmentation, the optimization algorithm. So that's kind of a different, I would say, a discipline of AI where those optimization algorithms are really making a mark, both in terms of inventory optimization, where you're really taking where AI is necessarily augmenting leadership in understanding the best buying decisions so that our network is optimized. So optimization algorithms are also a big part of it. And then from a move standpoint, where we're talking about like the inbound logistics from the suppliers warehouses to our warehouses, route optimization, huge opportunity, especially for today when the logistics cost, the labor costs are actually more. Visibility and supply chain resilience kind of goes hand in hand, especially during the current days when there's a lot of volatility around shipments, a lot of volatility around the labor cost, etc. It's important to understand whether there is a disruption, whether there is a delay with your inbound loads, and that really helps you make the best decision and take the next best action, right? That's where AI is augmenting the processes more and more. And then of course with warehousing and store, I mean, things are we are kind of living in a more integrated world where the demand forecast itself that we are talking about in plan is actually giving out inputs for warehouse labor planning as well. So we don't really have to have a separate labor plan and demand forecast, etc. So that is creating a lot of efficiency in terms of my labor management, in terms of my operational efficiency in the warehouse. And then at the end of the spectrum, of course, when we sell, how do we intelligently kind of allocate our customers' orders to make sure it comes from the right distribution centers to optimize cost, to optimize our kind of net. What we want to do is kind of get to our lowest net landed cost, right? Which is absolutely cost per piece is the name of the game. And cost per piece, cost per serve, cost per pallet, whatever you say, right? At the end of the day, a big part of supply chain is the downstream optimization of supply chain carrying cost or cost per piece. And that's where AI is playing a huge role, as well as the outbound route optimization, and then something like smart catalogs, generating marketing content, which is not there in the slide, but if you think about it for a cell, generating market, those are something which is very rich in Gen AI. So as I was telling, it's not everything about Gen AI. Gen AI is not, I mean, Gen AI is the attractive jargon at this point of time, but I think it's important for us to understand that at the end of the day, it's about problem solving and choosing the right tools for the right problem. So the most important takeaway, at least for me, when I look at supply chain and using AI ML technology for supply chain is, we should not first have the hammer and then find out the nail, right? Which should be the other way around. So everything should start from use cases. So understanding the use cases, applying our understanding of AI to join the dots and understanding which fits better for the use case is the most important thing. So I'm done with the easy part. Now I'll give it to Arjun to talk about the tough part, right? It's easy to talk for me to or Arjun to talk about all these use cases and everything, but when you actually go deep and get your hands dirty, we'll see all these pitfalls, all the challenges, etc. So Arjun, all yours for that.
No, like that was a great way that you laid it out there, Pritam. Like from plant to cell, right? Like basically you covered that entire cycle. So before I go on to the next slide, I just wanted to pulse check with the audience and see if there are any thoughts, like what do you all think about this? Where are you in that journey? Any thoughts or comments at this point?
So I haven't seen any AI being used. I'm more operations, so a lot of what we do, with navigating the ships, AI would be helpful, but they haven't implemented it yet. But I'm really interested in how on the vessels that transport this stuff
Mhm.
as an operations staff, how we could use it, because I think it could be really helpful. And thank you guys for coming to talk about this, because it kind of gives me more of a insight into how AI can be used for us as operations too, just thinking about it in the supply chain perspective.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Amanda, thank you for the great question, and I'll probably take a stab at it, and then Arjun, please chime in as needed. So I think from an operations perspective, when we are talking about, like, say, warehouse operations, right? As I was telling, the whole warehouse, I'm coming from a Cisco perspective, right? Warehouse shift planning, right, or labor planning is a big area of opportunity where AI could make a difference. So think about when you get your demand, and if you have an accurate demand, and you know that on this day for this specific time slots, these are my inbound shipments, for example, right? So it's important for us to really do the maths in terms of, do I have Arjun in dock 1 or door 1, Pritam in door 2, and Joanna in door 3, but you know what, in door 3 there are more, so you need somebody else. And then, when we talk about even in those doors, if it's like temperature controlled, and also talk about people's efficiency. So all this data, if we have that data available, right? And of course, for AI, it's very important that your data is clean. At the end of the day, AI will produce what your data gives, right? So if your data is good, so it will really help you and this is just one use case for operations, where you can really help plan the shifts in the warehouse. AI can also help in terms of, so for example, when you receive your products, if you have certain capabilities with, let's say, RFIDs or some kind of what we call as edge computing, or if your devices or your devices are smart enough to actually, if we have devices that are smart enough to kind of capture the barcodes and all the other signals, and with the advancement in data processing, right, it can very quickly feed those signals to those AI engine, which could then really take informed decision in terms of your receiving efficiency, in terms of one classic example is when you receive, if you want to get the some kind of traceability, because right now, I mean, I can talk about the food service industry, because of course that is where I belong to. With the Food Safety Modernization Act, there is a lot of focus on traceability. So all these things, especially on the receiving side, during supply chain operations, AI can help. Just a couple of examples. Arjun, you want to add?
Sure. No, I think that's a great point. One thing I can add, Amanda, to your question specifically is, in my experience working at ExxonMobil, I was like overseeing an applied science team there, and there we were exactly solving the problem that you were talking about. In fact, there's a news article that ExxonMobil published back in 2017 or 18. I can give the reference to that. That's about the shipping route optimization, right? If you have like n number of ships that you want to go either from, I don't know, like Port of Baltimore or from the Gulf Coast, so to somewhere through the Middle East into Asia Pacific, right? I mean, like how, and you need to have these ships reach there by a certain time. I mean, like this could be barrels of oil that you are transporting from here, from the US or North America region to Asia Pacific for like refining and whatnot. So how do you do that route optimization? And I think Pritam touched based on that earlier, like that's part of that move bucket that you see there. I would say more than, I mean, like these days everybody calls that AI, but this is a classic, what I would call an optimization problem, which is just coming up with an advanced mathematical model to represent, right? Like you're translating that business problem into an optimization problem where there is something called a quote unquote objective function. And then there are constraints. Your constraints could be cost, time or both, or like that could be like additional constraints. So you can represent that business problem as a mathematical problem and then solve that iteratively. You don't need the recent advent of the generative AI or ChatGPT to solve that. In fact, ChatGPT cannot solve that. It can only give you recommendations, right? So these are the areas where you should go back to first principles based approach. And obviously, more of the advancements in AI in this world, which is like the ChatGPTs of the world, can help you kind of come up with a good commentary around it, or help you do some research for you so that you don't have to spend that time. So use the right set of tools to augment your approach, but also don't forget applying first principles to solve these problems. So that's the comment that I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was definitely referring to the route optimization, because I know when I was in school, that was something in my supply chain classes, especially specifically in regards to maritime. That's something we definitely talked about in regards to, and we compared it to COVID too. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I think Mao has his hands. You have a question, Mao?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, question for you, Pritam. So you were talking about the hammer before the nail. You were making reference to AI is not going to resolve everything, that it has to be fit for purpose, right? What is the most, I guess, pragmatic way to do that, right? Is it through a return on investment analysis? What is it that you've seen in the application, in the acquisition of AI solutions? What is the best way to approach that?
Yeah, no, great question. And in fact, I know Arjun has some solid content on that as well. But this is good time. I mean, I think this is where we want this to be as interactive as possible and not get into like strictly the slides, etc. So again, great question, Mao. And Arjun, of course, please add more color. So there is no. You are right. I mean, as I was telling, there is no one way, right? So how we did, right? How we have been doing in Cisco, and Arjun can talk about it, is so we start with workshops, right? And first thing first, I think education or awareness, right, comes first. As I was telling, that awareness really helps in managing that hype cycle, right? So where we first tell people or have a open discussion on what we are trying to do, like what AI is and what are the different spheres that we are talking about, so that the people who are actually giving us or working on the use cases really get really join the dots in terms of, okay, demand forecasting, then it's not Gen AI, right? So something like that. So I think the first is education / awareness. Once that is there and people have the base and we are all aligned on what we are trying to do, what we are not trying to do, right? Then we talk about, then let's start use case, right? Use case, and that pretty much comes with things like design thinking, where we build a business case. So if it is demand forecasting, right? For example, this is just an example. So basically come up with the business case that, okay, what is our current forecast accuracy, for example? And and if we increase our forecast accuracy by 3%, right? What does that reflect? How does that reflect in the P&L? How does that reflect in inventory carrying cost or the reduction of inventory carrying cost? So that's step 2, to kind of build that business case, and then prioritizing it, right? What's most important? And as you said, rightly said, it could be a function of ROI. And then it's not just necessarily just ROI. Typically what I've seen is it's a 2-dimensional game. It's a matter of speed, which is time to market, versus, of course, the ROI, right? So you can have a higher ROI use case, but it is really something that will take like 4 years to complete, right? And a lot of things can change in 4 years. A lot of things, and in today's world, a lot of things are changing in days, right? So you really don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. And then you will have certain things where in certain use cases where the ROI might not be that big, but you will get some quick wins. So it's a tightrope, and that's where the overall business case comes into picture. And what you typically do is kind of take a mix. You take a mix, and I've seen that practically in some of the supply chain transformations that I have been fortunate enough to be part of and lead the technology delivery of. That sometimes those small things like the quick wins, the quick wins actually, I would say, fund the entire digital transformation. Because once you get those quick wins, the ROI for that will make the big efforts kind of almost self-funded, right? So if you first try to do something for which you will get the ROI, it's a big ROI, but you will get it in like 4 years or so. You'll probably come to a cycle where after, there will be a lot of excitement in the beginning, but after 6 months, you'll always, invariably, there will be a fatigue that when am I getting my ROI, and I'm spending a lot, and AI is not very cheap, right? Whereas, so that's where I think it's a mix. It's not an exact science, but it's a mix of choosing that carefully so that you get your quick wins, which can in turn fund your big wins, the revolutionary ideas, right? So evolutionary versus revolutionary. So I think that's where it comes. Then of course you choose your technology. You talk about which discipline of AI is more suited to it, but that comes later. But you are right. It starts from the use cases, and it's what I have seen is it's hardly a formulaic science. It's more of an art in terms of choosing the best fit use cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said, Pritam. I mean, like one thing I can kind of attest to that and add on is, and we have a couple of slides to talk through as well. When you think about which use case to prioritize, like think about that effort and impact, and then in the new advent of the generative AI, especially, also think about like a risk, right? So you can have how much ever the dimensions that you want, but at least what I have personally, like what I personally do, like within my company, and also all the other startups and enterprises that I advise is, like look at the effort impact, put them in some kind of a matrix, and then give a risk metric to it. If you have low effort, kind of like even if it is a medium impact, but low effort, medium to high impact use cases with low risk quantification to it, go for it, right? Obviously, it has to be, I mean, I'm assuming that by that time, when you do your use case distillation, they are already tied to your strategic priorities. So as long as if you start with 100 use cases, everything tied to your strategic priorities one way or the other, put them in that kind of a radar, map it out in that radar in whatever dimension makes sense to you, and then tap those low-hanging fruit. Because what you don't want to do is work on someone where you work on a use case, but you think there is a high potential ROI, but it is taking years for you. So the payoff is not going to pan itself out. And then there is a risk of adoption, right? Because whoever is building this have to make sure that it's also being consumed or being adopted by either your own internal enterprise customers or your external customers. So there's also a risk around like adoption that you need to think of as well. So I just wanted to add that color to it. But great question. All right. So awesome. I mean, this is fantastic discussion. What I'll do is in the interest of time, I'll probably skip a few slides, because some of them are either like rinse and repeat, or it's saying the same thing that we have already discussed probably. I'll spare this one because it's more data sciencey or AI build focused. I'll try to kind of go into things where you can think of an AI as a strategy for your own enterprise. This slide is very close to me. A lot of the executive workshops that I run, and a lot of the awareness workshops that I do for my CXOs within my company, I always start with this. Um, you know, earlier in the earlier in our talk, we talked about the data and AI analytics maturity, and here, I just want to go a little bit more into the weeds, right? Everybody should be able to assess where they are in, like in terms of a roadmap. If you want to bake AI as a part of your DNA, if you want to do AI as a part of your digital transformation or your supply chain digital transformation, then you need to have some kind of a roadmap. And the good way to start with the roadmap is, like I would split them into 4 different phases. The first phase, I think, as Pritam earlier hit on, is always think about your data and anything around the governance, because just like any previous flavors of analytics and advanced analytics, generative AI also doesn't work if your data is bad, right? This quote unquote garbage in, garbage out holds good in the era of generative AI. And the reason why I'm harping on that is there are a lot of leaders who have asked me and say, hey, if I have bad data, will a chat GPT like model, will a generative AI kind of model come and solve it for me? No, that's not the case. So having good data, having sanity around your data, and like when we think about supply chain, having a hygiene around your ERP, making sure that your data quality and data governance, your master data, everything is properly managed and properly governed is very important. So that's where you start from a data perspective, and how you transition to an AI is, are you practicing, either you build it yourself or you partner with a vendor, like a third party vendor or a systems integrator. Like however you do that, you need to make sure that these models, these AI models, which is actually using the data as a feedstock and trying to come up with some kind of recommendation or some kind of an outcome so that you can make a decision on it, is properly governed. So there's a governance and that quality that you need to think of from both the data and the model. So that's your first phase, right? When you are going from that awareness to actively building or actively starting to look into it, that's what you need to do. And then in the very near horizon, what I advise my clients and my internal customers are, let's think about everyday AI. And what that means is it is primarily internally focused where the risk is low. Why? Because just imagine, like you all would have heard about horror stories around around chat GPT, right? The most recent one I know is that the city of New York actually spun up a chat GPT for all the landlords and the tenants, right? And there actually the chat GPT was recommending, like this was in partnership with Microsoft, and they spun up, with this thing called Azure OpenAI. So everything was built to scale and with proper perfection from what they thought. But the thing is that this chat GPT was giving out wrong information to tenants when they were asking pertinent questions around some terms and like when does their contract expire and whatnot. So what I mean to say is, like, if you directly go for external focused use cases where you are putting this AI out to the customer's hand, you need to be extra sure that all, like, everything that you see from that phase 1 to 3 is already sorted out. And if not, your risk quotient is going to be higher. So I would say try to focus on that everyday AI, which is mostly internal focus. It's usually that low risk, low effort, high impact kind of use cases. uh, a lot of us, especially in the supply chain world, we sit on a corpus of document, and we have to process POs and invoices and codes and RFPs, RFQs, whatnot, right? So we all sit on tons of document depending on the flavor of the document. And that document processing is a very low-hanging use case to me, right? Because this is kind of augmenting some of the manual data entry work that a lot of folks have been doing now. Like you have a more advanced, automated way of doing it. That's just one example. Usually these use cases are focusing on employee productivity improvement and efficiency gains, right? It's not yet putting it in the hands of the customer. And as phase 3, what I would say is, as you go along with your maturity, go from that active to operational to systemic, I would say think about like your workforce planning, including how are you going to do training programs, because just like human evolution has gone through, industrial revolution, or be it the age of automation, or be it the age of internet, AI is just like another piece of technology which is out there, which is help us all drive, be better as at what we do, and it's there to augment, right? So that is a skill renewal, or like a skill set renewal that needs to happen there, and that is part of that workforce planning. That there, as Pritam was earlier saying, there also need to be some kind of an pulse on ROI, and there needs to be an ROI driven use case in tech mechanism because you can't solve 100 problems at the same time. So we need to be very careful on how are you going to be doing the use case prioritization. There's a lot of cultural transformation, again, right, at all layers of hierarchy within an organization. And from my own perspective, I lead a team that actually builds AI, but I also partner with a lot of third-party vendors. So that's a strategy, right? Are you going to build, are you going to buy, or are you going to borrow, or is it going to be a mix of strategies? There's no perfect answer to that as well. So once you kind of go through all these three phases, then you can go into more of these transformative AI opportunities where, as I said, like these are all like high ROI initiatives. It could be CapEx intensive, your payoff when you do your NPV analysis, like you might be seeing that your payoff wouldn't be coming until a few years down the lane. So these are more like, what I'm hearing large enterprises kind of do is come up with an autonomous supply chain tower, which can orchestrate everything for you, be it order to cash or procure to pay, like that entire life cycle, right? We're not there yet. It is still in that conceptualization phase from what I see. Digital twins, like we all hear about digital twins, be it for oil and gas or be it for a transportation company, right? Like that can be a digital twin for everything that we do. And then things like product recommendation, if you have like an e-commerce business, for instance. Um, so that is the like a lay of the land I want to put out there in terms of a roadmap and how to think about maturing your AI capabilities within your own organizations or enterprise. And then the key thing to know is what are the success metrics? Are you going to be looking at your impact on the revenue? Not everything has a tangible impact on the revenue, by the way, right? So, but are you going to be using that as one of the metrics? Is it operational efficiency? As I said in that earlier phase, in the phase two, most of it is in the in more of the operational efficiency. So it's intangible, but you still have to quantify it. Uh, and then the third thing is you have to make that data-driven decision making, right? That's what is going to increase the use of your data analytics and help with your strategic decision making. So I know this is a lot to chew on, but again, wanted to pause here. Pritam, if you had any more color to add to it, or anybody from the audience, if you had any questions or comments, we'll be happy to take.
I have a question. I think part of getting awareness and getting people on board is dealing with our legal teams. How do you gain like security trust within the organization? Any like security protocols or just straight education? How did you and how would you approach that?
No, that's a great question. So I can quote like two different instances working in two different organizations. You need to get I mean like my at least from my own experiences, try to form these steering committees or stakeholder groups, which is very diverse, like where you have HR, where you have legal, where you have folks from IT, digital, where you have people from business, core supply chain team, right? Because unless or until we come in as a diverse group and hear everybody out, like you're not going to get everybody out. So for me, I always believe on that stakeholders, having that diverse set of stakeholders and use them as a steering committee to push on your AI initiatives, right? Like once you bring it, because like, I mean, like one of the things that I see, one of the challenges that I see is that lack of inclusion. If you don't include the HR and then you advance on your AI use case, and the HR is going to come back and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Like what about confidential data? What about PII and PHI? They're only going to ask you more questions, right? So as a part of the awareness, bring together all kind of skill set and have formed that diverse set of steering committee or that stakeholder committee, and then use your own internal resources or partner with external resources. There are tons of people out there. If you have your own cloud provider or your data platform provider that you partner with for your enterprise needs, they do a lot of these awareness. So they come and do workshops, right? So I would say take advantage of that. In my case, what I also do is, like within my company, me and my team, we have put together internal boot camps, internal learning. So we have like open office hours where like anybody can come in and ask any question under the sun about AI, or about, it could be a risk about AI, it could be a technology question, or it could be an ROI question, it could be anything, right? So I would say use a combination of all of that. That's at least from my experience. Anything from you, Pritam? Like how do
No,
you?
I think we have covered it. I think the key, as you said, is that steering committee and to have checkpoints. So, for example, when we are in my company, whenever we are taking like AI use cases, it goes through certain gates. So we do have like a, first of all, business case. Of course, everything starts from there. Then we kind of have an architectural review board. That's another gate which we have to cover, where we actually talk about the whole technology architecture as well as the business process, the business architecture, so that we get to understand the flow, the data flow better, and people get to understand that, okay, this is something where we are not necessarily sending like PIIs, right? Like confidential information, etc. The third step is cyber approval. Very, very, very important, where cybersecurity gets involved. Again, understands the architecture, looks at common pitfalls, and make sure it is compliant. And then once all these gates are passed, then you start talking about the design, etc. I mean, not the design, but kind of the detailed design, etc. And then one very, very important thing is the feedback loop, right? So we need to have continuous feedback loop with your stakeholders, because it is sometimes a long drawn process where it's not just building the model is I would say the most attractive thing, but it's the last piece of the puzzle. There is the whole data engineering, understanding your data, making it appropriate for modeling, and then training the model, and finally the operational piece and productionizing it, right? There's a lot. So every gate, I think we need to have checkpoints so that we fail fast. It's very important, because a lot of the work that is happening in I would say Gen AI more, because traditional AI has been here for quite some time now. But even there, I think a lot of enterprises have kind of woken up to AI after this Gen AI Gen AI explosion, where they don't want to miss the bus, right? And that's where it is important for us to fail fast, understand if it is worth it, and then kind of move to the subsequent stages. So yeah, I think that governance is very important, as Arjun also pointed out.
Yeah, very, very well said. Just a quick time check with Joanna. How are we doing? I know we are close to that end, and we haven't even gone halfway through. That's great, because we wanted to be interactive and have more questions. But
Yeah.
how much more time do we have, Joanna?
Yes, so for the presentation, we only have about 5 minutes. However, we always give about 10 minutes for questions. So
Okay.
time checking, so we have about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So in that
And
case,
again, as we said, that we are just pivoting based on the interest, right? Because that's what is important more than like the slide. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in that case, let's do a quick poll with the audience, like a verbal poll. We can talk about, I mean, we can just go over a few use cases, or we can talk about what
Yeah.
the future beholds. Like what would the what are the next advancements that we see in this world of AI, and wrap things up. Is there any preference on what you want to see or hear?
Use cases.
There you go. I love it. So I'll skip. I mean, like these are all Gartner slides that we want to talk through, but you all know about the hype cycle. Like right now, generative AI is kind of riding that hype cycle, but it's also going into that trough of disillusionment. What that means is, I think this slide is like really key. If you all have not seen this, use this and percolate this up to your upper management, because in every company they have investor pressure and board pressure to look at generative AI and then sprinkle generative AI everywhere. And what I would say is, like I work as like as much as I'm involved in my company, I'm also involved externally and talk to the Gartners and Foresters of the world. We are already seeing like there are tangible data points out there that in 3-4 years from now, more than that 50% of those enterprise use cases are going to go down. They are going to abandon that because of cost and complexity. And then we call it like tech debt or total cost of ownership, TCO. That just doesn't make sense, right? So this is like really important for us to kind of understand and acknowledge before we embark on that journey. So I just wanted to put that out there. Well, let me go to use case. I thought I'll share a couple of the use cases, coming from my own experience. One is, I mean, like this is from my experience working at Amazon. I was with Amazon Retail. I was overseeing a data engineering and a data science group for Amazon Prime Air. So I live in Houston and I used to travel to Dallas almost like every week, to talk to the operations technicians because we were trying to roll out a predictive maintenance program there. And basically, I mean, like what I wanted to kind of take away through these case studies is that it has a lot of, like obviously it is highly related to what we do in supply chain. This is more operations focused. But through this, think of what is the problem that you want to solve? How are you going to like distill that problem statement? And how do you kind of assess the impact? For that, you need to know what is the current state, what is that desired state, and then how are you going to be like thinking about ROI, right? So those are the theme that I wanted y'all to take away. So in this particular use case, it was, Amazon Prime Air. You all know they have 18, I think close to 18 miles of conveyor belts, right? And the challenge they were having is from a maintenance standpoint. Like they wanted to kind of constantly improve their downtime, right? Or like lower their downtime because key metrics for operation oriented folks, you all know it is OEE, uh, right? Like original equipment effectiveness. So as a part of OEE, as a way to kind of like lower their OEE, and why that is important, because for a company of scale like Amazon, for their retail section, if they lose, I mean, like if they if they have one additional hour of downtime, that is equivalent to $32 million of lost sales. So there is a very tangible impact there, right? So here the need of the hour was, hey, how can we improve the predictive maintenance? And this was specifically about the vibrations or around the vibrations on the gearboxes and the conveyor belts and rollers and whatnot. And instead of reactively monitoring and fixing that, where you kind of, it impedes your downtime, can you proactively do that monitoring? And after me and my team understood the problems, after talking to our operations technician and the warehouse managers, is like we came up with a low cost solution which is also scalable, which is kind of installing, I mean, like using overhead cameras and then installing additional cameras to track the video, to use the recorded video of the content and then use that to detect the vibrations in it, right? I mean, that are there other ways to solve it? Yes, absolutely. But the need of the hour here was how do we reduce the downtime? Because Amazon Prime Air, that's a big part of business for Amazon in the retail, and how can data science or AI help? So we did have a pulse on ROI because we knew how important was the downtime. We were able to kind of come up with estimates of how much of downtime can we reduce if, per DC or per FC, once we put this in place. And then there is also a big safety liability because what was happening is these operations technicians would actually roll their tool cart and they would have like UE strobes and their IR device and whatnot, and then they would put the strobe on the machine, right? So you are actually avoiding a human contact there. So from a safety perspective, and for me coming from an oil and gas company, it is huge, right? Like we cannot compromise on safety, and there's no price tag to it. So the whole theme of this was again understand your business problem even before you think about technology. Know what is the expected ROI that is tangible and intangible. Understand the current state of operations there, if it is, and then come up with and then design and come up with the technology solution. right? Any questions on this?
Yeah, I think Julian has a question in terms of not necessarily on predictive maintenance, Arjun, but more like how do you streamline your AI-enabled applications with your ERP? So Julian, I was about to type this as well, but better to talk. So multiple ways, right? And the approach is first we have to understand, if the ERP that we are talking about, right, is it a third-party product, like a off-the-shelf product, like the SAPs of the world or Oracle or whatever? Or is it a custom ERP? For Cisco, for example, we have custom ERP. So if it is off-the-shelf product, it's about working with those providers, with the vendors, to actually have embedded AI. So I know, SAP, Oracle, if you look at even planning softwares, right, the O9s of the world or Kinaxis of the world, they have embedded AI capabilities anyways, be it supplier collaboration, be it forecasting, those are all kind of AI enabled. So it becomes easier. But the flip side of it is there will be customizations, right? It depends, again, depends on the business model. There will be customizations. So for those customizations, or if you have like a custom made ERP, I think the major point is having like cloud-based technology so that it becomes easier to integrate, right? Because the moment it gets into legacy, it becomes tough to talk to each other. And that's where kind of cloud technologies come into picture. So those AI systems that we are talking about could be almost packaged as a service, right? Where I have, let's take a small example of demand forecasting. Let's say I want to have a demand forecasting engine, which will give me a very good forecast accuracy, right? So I can have that. So one approach is, talk to your provider who actually gives you demand planning or forecasting capability, and work with their product roadmap. So that's embedded AI. Or you build a forecasting engine and then expose that software as a service to your ERP, so that your ERP could consume it. So those are kind of the big or the broad two approaches where you could streamline your AI enabled tools with your ERP. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the response. Makes sense.
And then I can just add on to that, because at Vesco we sit on close to 25 plus ERPs, all non-standard, right? So it's not the Oracles of the world or the SAPs of the world. So that makes it highly heterogeneous. And the strategy, even before thinking about AI, is, I think Pritam hit the nail on the head there. You need to think about a holistic strategy to bring everything to one source of truth. So the first step would be, hey, like everything is highly disparate on-prem systems spread all over the world, or spread all across. And if you want to do cross ERP, if you want to tap into data across ERP, there is no AI system that you can put in place unless or until you make it too clunky, right? So the first step would be, how are you going to be partnering or working with some kind of a cloud provider to get it all to one source of truth? And in this world, and in this day and world, there are things around data warehouse and data lake. If you have not heard about that term, look that up. That is a place where a lot of the supply chain companies, especially who sit on multiple heterogeneous ERPs, are doing. The data lake would bring all the data across the ERP to a single source of truth. And once you have a single source of truth, which probably runs in the cloud, then, as Pritam said, to package any AI model and then make it talk to each other becomes seamless. Yes, there is a cost component, there is an effort component upfront, but that's where you all need to think about, hey, what is the payoff going to be? What are the use cases? Like, how am I going to impact myself down the lane? Understanding and acknowledging that it's going to come immediately, and you need to go through that pain to hydrate everything into that common source of truth. So it's all around data and the transformations that you need to make upfront, even before you start to think about putting AI on top of it. Great. So we are 7:25. I know, I don't want to take too much time by going through the PowerPoints, but I thought as we can maybe wrap it up in that final slide that we had here. and we can make this slide available. I can send it to Joanna, like no issues with us sharing it. But just as closing thought, I would say, like as we shared, make sure that even before you embark on your AI or your generative AI initiatives, make sure that it is broadly aligned to your business, to your corporate strategy, and then think about your ROI, how you are going to maximize that ROI and impact. Right? I think Pritam hit the note on that second bullet point there, which is that iterative implementation. AI is not one and done. Unlike the traditional software engineering, here once you adopt an AI approach and like whatever that roadmap or the journey, you need to allow a lot of flexibility. There is going to be continuous learning. You might have heard of this term called human in the loop. That cannot be that is like really applicable when you think about AI. And what that means is, AI is there to augment whatever human decision making is, and then you need to have SMEs and humans in the loop to validate that give feedback to the AI. The beauty about AI is that it can learn, unless or until you put that human in the loop, and to make your AI continuously learn with the changing nature of the data, with the changing flavors of the data, you're not going to be able to continue to reap the rewards of it. So that is very, very important. The third thing is, again, going back to KPI, use the relevant KPI to measure what that matters to your business. Because, like at least from my 18 plus years experience of doing AI all the way from my grad school to my recent time, is that it can easily become a science experiment if you don't have that pulse on that ROI, and if you don't have the KPIs that you're constantly measuring. And the last one is that change management, right? Like there is a lot of awareness for successfully adopting it. It's not just the technical execution or your strategy upfront, but then change management needs to be there. It needs to be hardly baked in within that organization to continue to drive that adoption and integrate your AI and advanced analytics across all levels of org. And that was my closing comment. Did you have anything to add on it, Pritam?
No, I think hopefully this was worth the time, team. I think we tried to make it try to make the narrative kind of seamless, where you start with the maturity curve, kind of talk about the approach and the different use cases across the value chain that we were talking about it, and then how to approach it, right? Starting from the use case. Use case is the key, and then a couple of use cases and the closing thoughts. So I think hopefully this was helpful. And again, if you have any question, any and you want to further deeper dive, feel free to reach out to me or Arjun in LinkedIn, and yeah, we'll be happy to collaborate.
Thank you very much to both Arjun, Pritam. This was very insightful, great presentation. So, yep, if you can, after the session, if you can just send it over, I will share it with all the attendees. So, and yeah, that would be absolutely great. And it was amazing having you both here today. So